Alhamdulillah الذي جعل نعمته في رياض جنان المقربين وخص بهذه الفضيلة من عباده المتفكرين وجعل التفكر في مصنوعاته وسيلة لرسوخ اليقين في قلوب عباده المستبصرين. استدل عليه سبحانه وتعالى بصنعته فعالمه وتحققه أن لا إله إلا هو فواحده وشاهد عظمته وجلاله فنزهه فهو القائم بالقسط في جميع الأحوال وهم الشهداء على ذلك بالنظر والاستدلال فعالم أنه حليم وقادر عليم. We begin by thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has allowed us to gather here in one of his houses this morning to reflect on his book. Imam al-Ghazali reminds us that those of the ibad of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who are mutafakkireen, who reflect, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them a blessing, fi riyadi janal al-muqarrabeen, brought nearer to him, and he has chosen with this fadila some of his ibad who are mutafakkireen, and he has made contemplation a source, a means لرسوخ اليقين في قلوب عباد المستبصرين, for the certitude in the hearts of his ibad who derive certainty in their hearts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they reach the station where they call out La ilaha illahu, there is none worthy of worship except him. فَوَحِدَهُ وَشَاهِدُ عَظْمَتِهِ وَجَلَالُهُ. So they testify to his wahdaniya, to his oneness, to his unicity, to his azma, and to his jalal. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy be upon all of us, on all the believers. And we seek his help in seeing the reality of things as they really are. Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'ah wa arina al-batila batilan wa waffiqna lijtinabahi wa la taj'alhu multabisan alayna fanadilla waj'alna lilmuttaqina imama. We seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy that he shows us the haqq as haqq and batil as batil, the false fallacy as fallacy, and he does not confuse us, and he makes us the foremost among those who have taqwa. Allah manfa'na bima 'allamtana wa 'allimna ma yanfa'una wa zidna ilma. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we seek your mercy to increase in our knowledge and benefit from the knowledge that you have granted us, and we seek knowledge that benefits us. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahabi ajma'in. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in Surah Al-Imran, Inna fi khalqi samawati wal ardi wa ikhtilafi al-layli wan nahari li ayatin li ulil albab alladhina yazkuruna Allaha qiyaman wa qu'udan wa ala junubihim ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, in the alternation of the day and of the night and the day, there are signs for ulil albab, for people of reflection. There are signs. And these are the people who remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala standing, sitting, when they are lying on their sides, and they reflect in the creation of Allah, of the samawat and the earth, and the samawat. And then when they reflect, they call out, Rabbana ma khalaqta hadha batila. O our Rabb, O our Lord, you have not created these in falsehood. Faqina azab an-nar, grant us safety from the punishment of fire. Continuing our reflection on the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, recall that we stopped last time in using Imam al-Ghazali's Al-Hikmah fi Makhlukat al-Allah, where he goes into the individual organs, the hikmah, the wisdom in the creation of the ear, the creation of the eyes, the creation of the nose, the bones. And we pick up from the same place, inshallah, and remembering that our focus is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are not going to be sidetracked with other things. And the focus is to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way we should know him as much as we can. Creation, we said, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the widest, the most vast realm out of everything that is available to us as human beings to gain some access to him, because his Zat, his essence, is totally out of reach for us. His Sifat, we said there are some paths in those Sifats, but the creation, the act of through which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created everything that exists, is the widest possible path for us. We said creation can be divided into two broad categories, the one which is material and the one that is not material. Allazi khalaqal mawta wal hayata liyabluwakum ayyukum ahsana. So the death and life that he created, they are not material things, but there are material things. There was one question that was asked about the dying of the stars. When we said that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, he has created it for a certain time, and no human being can increase or decrease anything in the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we gave the example of the mosquito, that when the mosquito comes and we kill it, we haven't decreased anything from the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala other than this one tiny bit life going out because of that act of hitting the mosquito. But the matter, the actual matter still stays. And then the question was asked, what happens to the stars when they die out? So I want to pick up from that place, and we are not going to have a lesson in science, but there is this development, as I mentioned last time, what Imam Ghazali and others knew in the 11th century was a tiny bit of what we know in the realm of science, in the realm of the visible universe or even the invisible universe, but in the realm of the manifest universe. We have more tools, we have more techniques. The information that we have now is so huge compared to what they had. But at the same time, we mentioned that this information has not necessarily increased wisdom. It has not increased overall human situation to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we are not really impressed by the lack of transference of information into wisdom because of that, but we cannot discard the information that we have at the same time. So this attitude towards science needs to be a very balanced attitude, that science does not become an ilah, which unfortunately it has become for many Muslims. Science is not to be worshipped. Science is one of the branches of knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for us, and it needs to be seen and pursued within its legitimate reasons. So one of the things that I wanted to mention in reference to the question that was asked about the disappearance of matter, such as the stars, is that we used to think that matter is conserved. There's a law of conservation of mass, that we cannot destroy matter. We can only change forms of the matter, as you asked the question last time about what happens to the tree that was there, and we made a table out of it. We just converted one form of matter into another form of matter. But with the advent of the nuclear weapons and the coming of this quantum physics within the reach of human knowledge, what happened with Einstein, especially after 1905, he published 5 papers in a row in the summer of 1905. And these are amazing papers. They're just tremendous insight into the nature of matter in those 5 papers. It's just amazing that he had never set a foot in a lab at that time, and he comes up with these ideas, which end up very quickly, within 35 years or so, into these atomic bombs, which changed our understanding of the conservation of matter. And then suddenly it wasn't just the matter that became conserved, but matter joined with energy. So matter and energy combined together became one system. You can convert energy into matter and matter into energy. But in a closed system, both are still conserved. And that's where the crux of the matter is. What is a closed system? If human beings have access to the moon, to the sun, to the planets, other planets, are we disturbing the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by reaching out to the realms which were not accessible before the advent of modern science? So our reflection, we said we are going to go into the words used in the Qur'an for creation. And today's class is, inshallah, going to be focused on 2 aspects. One of the words is Allah is the Badi'u Samawati wal Ard. So bida, ba, dal, ain, is one of those words that I shared with you about the used in the Quran for creation. Every single word in the Quran used for creation has a specific aspect of creation inherently built into it. And we said last time the word khalaqa is shared by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with human beings also. There are ayahs, as we will go into details of those when we go into those details, where Isa alayhi salam, for example, says khalaqtu. He uses the first person khalaqtu, I create. What does that mean in terms of creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? But Badi'u Samawati wal Ard, which occurs twice in the Quran, is not shared. There is no one else other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is called Badi'u Samawati wal Ard in both cases. And it's very, very important for us to, as we reflect on these ayahs, to know the context of this creation. So the connection here between the conservation of mass, then turning into mass and energy, conservation of mass and energy after Einstein's discovery, the special relativity, and this Badi'u Samawati wal Ard, the usage of the Badi'u Samawati wal Ard, is the understanding of what Samawat is. What is the Quranic term Samawat? Because, and this also connects with the question that was asked about the disappearance of the stars. This Samawat is an untranslatable word. There are words in the Quran which should not be translated because translations distort the semantic fields. They destroy the meanings of those words. There is a handful of words, and they need to be used in English to the extent they become English words. This needs to happen because English is now a Muslim language. We express ourselves in this language. The Queen does not have a copyright on it. This language is taught, all languages are taught by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allama al-Bayan, He taught us the language. Languages do exist within civilizations, but now this civilization is everywhere, and English needs to be Islamized, just as Persian was Islamized, just as Arabic itself was Quranized by the revelation of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changed the nature of language by sending this book. Urdu, Turkish, all of these languages were Islamized in the course of history. Inshallah, this will also happen to English. The terms in which cannot be translated, can be a list of those terms, like ihsan, for instance. We cannot translate ihsan in English. There is no word for it. If we translate it, then we are distorting the semantic range of ihsan. Likewise, samawat. Every single translation of the Quran that we see, what do? They use the word heavens. If we think about what heavens means, it means nothing. It's empty of content. Heavens, the word heavens is empty of any reality behind it, because it just gives us a vague feeling of something up there. Heavens is in plural. It has no content. It doesn't correspond to Jannah. It doesn't correspond to anything. And it distorts our understanding of Sama Dunya. Sama Dunya is one of the terms in the Quran. He adorned, he beautified the Sama of Dunya with these stars. Human reach, both practical and theoretical, is only to the Sama of Dunya. So the stars which are fading, turning into energy, all the galaxies, and our galaxy is just one of several galaxies. Everything is in this Sama of Dunya. And what we know of Sama of Dunya is not the totality of Sama of Dunya. Because the shayateen are also in this Sama, who are being hit by this shihab. And we have no means to understand their reality. Science has no tools to know what shayateen are there. Shayateen in Surah Al-Jinn, they are actually aware that the Quran, there is something strange happening. Something extraordinary is happening now. We used to be stationed in the Sama, and we used to know we need to sneak into the news. We used to have access to certain knowledge that was not accessible to others, but to us, the jinn say. But now there are guards there. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down the Quran, He fortified the protection of His revelation by doing something to the sky of this dunya as well. Not only where Jibreel alayhi salam was, where the Kitab is, but also this dunya was protected. So in our understanding of the creation, the extent of creation, if we reflect on creation to reach the Creator, Imam al-Ghazali, he was only this very short text that he wrote. It's only 50 pages, so it's like a paper, not like a book. Hikmah fil makhluqatillah, the wisdom in the creation. What he was doing was taking individual organs and just drawing our attention to those. What we need to go to the next stage is not the individual organ, the nose, the ear, the eye, but also the connection between these systems that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has built. And then the vastness just starts to increase. Because this, as I mentioned, he mentions the saltiness of the tears. The tears are salty, he said. But if we start to reflect on where in the system of our being salt is being added to the tears and why, what does that addition of salt does to our psychological, spiritual state at the moment of crying? How does it relieve the body, physical body, of some stress? What is the chemical reaction that is happening in the body at the moment of addition of salt into this water that's going to come out from the eyes? This Michael Behe's book on Darwin's Black Box, he's a biochemist. It's an amazing short book on the interconnectedness of biochemistry, biochemical reactions that happen in the human body, in the living beings, in all living beings, and how it is impossible for these precise nanosecond dependent reactions to happen without the creator. He just demolishes this whole evolutionary business at all with one small example of one single sub unit of an organ. So the smallest of the biological units that we have at present is a cell with a nucleus. A cell with a nucleus. If we reflect on that tiny little small cell itself, which now we have access through the instruments we have created or invented, that's one realm of reflection. And these galaxies, the samawat, are the other realm. Badiyu samawati wal ard, when we reflect on the context of the usage of, this is only 2 ayahs because the khalaq is huge, usage, number of ayahs using the root khalam kaf is just so huge. It will take us some time to, we'll inshallah organize those 238 references to khalaq in manageable groups. But because Badiyu Samawat is easier, let's just reflect on it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses Badiyu Samawati wal ard twice in his book. The first reference is in Surah Al-Baqarah, Badiyu Samawati wal ard, wa idha qada amran fa innama yaqulu lahu kun fayakun. He is the originator of the Samawat and the earth. And when he decides a matter, he only says kun, and it is. Be, and it is. And again, I remember when we come to the usage of kun, we will inshallah answer that question, not from ourselves, but our tradition has answered the question, raised the question and answered it. Kun fayakun, to what was the command kun, and if the thing shay already existed, then what does it mean to give the command kun? And if it didn't exist, then to what was the command? But let's go back to the context of Badiyu Samawati wal Ardi in Surah Al-Baqarah. This ayah appears in the context of قالت اليهود ليست النصارى على شيء وقالت النصارى ليست اليهود على شيء وهم يتلون الكتاب كذلك قال الذين لا يعلمون مثل قولهم فالله يحكم بينهم يوم القيامة فيما كانوا فيه يختلفون. The context is the Yahud and the Nasara, but the subcontext is وَقَالُوا اتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ وَلَدًا سُبْحَانَهُ بَل لَّهُ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ كُلٌّ لَّهُ قَانِتُونَ. This is in the context of this belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala na'uz taking a son. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings this usage of Badi'u Samawati wal Earth in the context of this belief about Isa alayhi salam being na'uz of son of Imam al-Tabari. First linguistic understanding of what Badi'a is. And it also comes from Raghib. This is one of the most wonderful, most important book in the sciences of the Qur'an, this Mufradat of Raghib. It hasn't been translated into, they tried to translate it into English, very terrible. First volume came and then they stopped. There is a good Urdu translation. But this needs to be translated with annotation and commentary. And obviously, Al-Tabari is before Raghib. Allah have mercy on both of them. And Al-Tabari himself is a mine of Quranic scholarship. And his methodology is that he first tells us what does the word means linguistically. So Badi is on the pattern of Fa'il, and sometimes he says, and it means the beginning of something for which there is no previous example, pattern, creating something without an instrument and without any material thing being there, as opposed to the usage of khalaq, which sometimes is used in the Quran for creation of something from existing things. Badi'u Samawat, Badi is creation without any existing pattern or any existing material. And he says that Famani al-Kalam, the meaning of the saying Subhanallah, Anna yakunu lahu walad, wa huwa maliku ma fi samawati wal ard, tashhadu lahu jamiyan bidalalatiha alayhi bil wahdaniya wa takarra lahu bi ta'a wa huwa bariha wa khaliqiha wa mujidiha min ghayri asl wala mithal. That how could they claim that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken a son, whereas he is the owner of the samawat and the earth, and everything in the samawat and the earth testify to his oneness, to his wahdaniya. So the connection between the usage of Badi'u Samawat, the connection between the creation of the heavens, Samawat and the earth. You see how it's embedded. Creation of the Samawat and the earth and the unicity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says that Al-Masih Allazi adafu ilallahi jalla sanahu, the Masih that they add to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As his son, the one who originated the samawat and the earth, min ghayri asl wa ghayri ghayr misal, Huwallazi ibtada al-Masih. He is the one who began Masih himself. They add it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The nafi, the negation Imam al-Tabari is doing here is that the one who is only one, he is the originator of the samawat and the earth, and he is the originator of al-Masih min ghairi walidihi, walid, bi kudratihi, without a father, through his kudra, through his power. And then his methodology is that he then lists every single predecessor who came during those 300 years before Imam Tabari himself, who said this, one after the other, riwayas with complete chains, because he is not looking at a book. He is teaching. Most of the tafasirs that we have from that time are the result of these halakas. They were not written in isolation. They were interactions, and then they were put together in. These were giants. They didn't have any notes. They didn't have any Wikipedia. They were not downloading anything. They were just talking. And all of these narrations were in their beings. And then when he says, Haddathni Musa, Qala Haddithna Amr, Qala Haddithna Isbat, Anasudi, Badiu Samawati Balad. Yani, Musa told me directly, one to one. And he said that Amr told us, and then all the chains. Most of them, they either go to one of the companions or one of the tabi'ins, because he's so close. Everything that came into the tafsir literature afterwards, after Imam al-Tabari's thing, most of it goes back to him or his contemporary. We mentioned last time, Ibn Abi Hatim, Rahimullah. So they preserved for us a living tradition, which was living tradition at that time. And in that tradition, we find these gems for reflection. The second reference to Badiu Samawat wal Earth. And this is extremely important for us to reflect on this one word used for creation, because this second reference, which is the Surah Al-An'am, Ayah 101, Badiu Samawati wal Ardi anna yakunu lahu walad. وَلَمْ تَكُنْ لَهُ صَاحِبًا وَخَلَقَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ. Subhanallah. Look at the interconnectedness of the message of the Quran through this thematic understanding of the theme of creation, that now in this ayah is mentioned with two unique words used for creation. One is the Badiu Samawat and the other is Khalaqa. Khalaqa is one of those 11 words we just said. Khalaqa kulla shayin wa huwa bi kulli shayin alim. And again the reference is to their belief in the Son. And here, anna yakunu lahu walad, how could there be a son for him? Walam takun lahu sahiba. He has no sahiba. He has taken no partner. So both references are true. The unicity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which they compromised on the basis of the belief in having a son. Allahu Akbar. 261, not 36 references to khalaqa, but Badi Samawat is only 2 references. We will inshallah go into the next section of our reflection on the theme of creation by going to mufradat and internalizing 2 things in relation to each other. When we started this theme, remember we went to mufradat to understand what is alam, what is what was the definition of alam? Everything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the creation, there is no word for alam. We said cosmos, but alam is everything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Today, inshallah, we are going to use mufradat to connect the process of reflection on the creation with the creation itself. Process of reflection, how do we reflect? What are the faculties we use to reflect? And these are all the resources that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. One of the most important faculties for reflection is aql. So for the rest of the time left today, inshallah, we are going to connect aql with alam. Linguistically as well as conceptually. What is aql? Ain, qaf, lam, aql. Al-aql yuqalu li-quwwa mutahayyati li-qabul al-ilm. ويقال للعلم الذي يستفيده الإنسان بتلك القوة عقل. لهذا قال الأمير المؤمنين رضي الله عنه: رعاية العقل عقلين، فمتبوع ومسموع، ولا ينفع مسموع إذا لم يكن متبوع، كما لا ينفع الشمس ودعو العين ممنوع. سبحان الله. He is just a gold mine. He says al-aql, which is used to reflect on the creation, is the quwwa. Quwwa is, let's say, faculty. It's got different meanings depending on the field we are in. Like in kalam, it would have a different meaning. In logic, it would have a different meaning. But let's just say aql is a faculty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given for qabul al-ilm, for the reception of knowledge. It's a faculty. It's an inner resource given to us that is used for the reception of knowledge. And because of this usage, the knowledge that is received through this faculty is sometimes also called aql. And he says, قال أمير المؤمنين رضي الله عنه. In our tradition, when the usage Amir al-Mu'mineen is like, it's a very specific usage for Sayyidina Ali radiallahu. And again, you will find mistranslation of Amir al-Mu'mineen in most English translations as commander of the believers. And if we reflect on this translation, what does commander bring to life, to mind? An army, fighting, commander. The word commander in English brings the idea, but Amir is not just commander on the battlefield. So perhaps a better translation perhaps is the leader of the believers. Amir al-Mu'mineen, the term Amir al-Mu'mineen came into our tradition when Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq died. When he was chosen, the title was Khalifatul Rasul. Khalifa there is linguistic as well as there are other associations, but the one who succeeds, the successor to the Prophet ﷺ. Sayyidina Umar didn't want to be the successor of the Prophet ﷺ for two reasons. And the haiba he had, like when Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq died, you know what he said? He cried and he said, what you have left behind is such a heavy burden, no one can take it. So that is when he became Amirul Mu'mineen, the leader of the believers. And then that title was transferred to Sayyidina Uthman. But when Sayyidina Ali came, that title became so attached to him that subsequently, normally in most of the literature that we see, he's the referent. So here again, وَلِهَذَا قَالَ أَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ. And for this reason, look at the connection that is being established between the definition of aql, which is the faculty that receives knowledge, and also the knowledge that is received is called aql. And he says, Sayyidina Ali said, Ra'atul aqla aqlain. Ra'atu is again something we cannot translate. Ra is to see. So the literal translation would be, I see aql as aqlain, as two kinds of aql. But this see is not seeing with the eye. This is seeing, this is the perception. Ra'ayatu al-aql. Fa-matbu wa masmu. One is imprinted. Taba, matbu, is the imprint. So this is in the constitution of the human being, one kind of aql. And the other is masmu, which literally means what is heard. Masmu, but a better translation of the two is innate aql and acquired aql. Innate aql is what is matbu, and acquired is what is called masmu. And he says, Sayyidina Ali says, Wala yanfa'u masmu is lam yaku matbu. The acquired aql doesn't benefit if the innate aql is not there. And he says, Kamala yanfa'u shams. The sunlight, the light of the sun does not benefit when the eye is not there. The acquired aql does not benefit if the innate aql is not there, and just as the sunlight doesn't benefit and then he gives the example of very beautiful example of summun bukmun umyun fahum la ya'qilun. Summun bukmun umyun fahum la ya'qilun. The example of those mathalul ladina kafaru kamathalil ladhi, those the example of those who do kufr, who are disbelievers, fahum la yaqilun, they do not. Yaqilun is the act of using the aql. So their innate aql is there in every human being, but it's like It's like something that is given to every child because it's part of fitra. Aql is part of fitra. But when it is destroyed to the extent that one cannot use it, that means the acquired aql is also inevitable. There is no child who comes to this dunya with all the faculties and does not gather something, impressions. As soon as the child starts to breathe, the very air that is going in the body is changing the constitution of the child. If the air is bad, and when the eyes open, when the hearing happens, when the child is in the womb of the mother, the eyes are not open, but the hearing is open. So whatever happens during those times, during those months in the womb of the mother, whatever is heard is already being imprinted. So the audio memory that we all carry from that time is still there. It's the first layer. Tibaka, like these things happen, layer upon layer upon layer, and the closest layer to the being is the one that happens first. Because we can, if we start to erase things, the top things go first. Like this building has paint, but behind the paint is the wall, and behind the wall is the structure. So the damage starts to happen from outside, but the closest to our being is the first layer. And the hearing is one of those first things that happen in a child. So what we do, how we connect aql with alam, is what we said we want to do for the rest of the time. So I want to go to the alam now, and what happens to the usage of aql. So we said alam is everything that other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alam is everything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does Raghib say about this root? Because ilm, knowledge, comes from the same root from which alam comes. So alam is the creation, our theme is creation, we are reflection on creation, but it is connected at the root level with ilm. And al-ilm is defined as idraku shay bi haqiqatihi. Ilm is the perception of a thing according to its haqiqah. Isn't that fascinating? That built into the definition of knowledge is the reality of the thing. Remember how we start the class all the time? Allah shows us the nature of things as they really are. Arinal haqq and haqqa. So batil and haqq, they have realities, and we seek Allah's mercy, we seek His blessing, we seek His assistance to know the haqq as haqq and batil as batil, because this is a matter of going to Jannah or Jahannam. This is so huge, the connections are so huge. Imam al-Raghib says that idraku shay bi haqiqatihi, the perception of a thing according to its reality, and that is of two kinds. One is idraku zati shay. One is the zat, is the essence. And the second is al-hukmu ala shay bi wujudi shay. وهو بوجود شيء هو موجود له or نفي شيء هو منفي له. This is so fundamental to understand our deen and to understand the process of reflection. So we said there is absolutely no way we can have any access to the Zat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Laysa kamithlihi shay, because there is nothing like Him. And we cannot perceive the Zat of Allah. So al-ilm is idraku zat is chay. One of the two aspects of ilm, of knowledge, is to have the perception of the essence of a thing. Like we can have perception of the essence of a created thing, like a tree, like a star, like the earth. We can have real perception of the knowables. الثاني حكم على شيء بوجود شيء أو نفي شيء. The hukm, the legal status of a thing, the legal status of a thing among things. So the Zat, and then what is the status of that thing among other things? The connection here is when we reflect on the creation, when we reflect on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, whether it's the smallest tiny little bit like a cell, or the entirety of the galaxies that we can reach or we can conceive with our instruments, the enormous vastness of the planets and the galaxies, whichever way it is, we need to know the hukm of that thing that we are reflecting on. What is the relationship of a cell with the rest of the creation? What is the relationship of this enormous totality of galaxies and the physical entities that we are trying to understand with the rest of the creation and with the purpose of its creation? This is where the disconnection has happened between the scientific investigations, the knowledge or information that we are gathering, and the hukm. Aql, which is the knowledge, and it has two aspects to it. That is the connection between this reflection, and it's becoming too difficult, I know, but avalam yanzuru malakuti samawati wal ard. في الدلالة على ثاني, the proof for the Sane, this is one of the terms in the creation theme. Sane is the one who, it's a specific word, we'll inshallah go to it. Avalam yanzuru fi malakuti samawati wal ard. Have they not reflected, have they not seen, literally speaking, have they not reflected on the malakuti samawati wal ard? He says, يسمى عالما فيقال عالم الإنسان وعالم الماء وعالم النار. Alam, the creation, is called in the plural, as we said last time. It's a ism jama, it's a collective noun within which there are tremendous number of alams. And he gives the example of alamul insan, the alam of insan, which is a total alam in itself. Alamul ma, the alam of water, the alam of nar, of fire. The connection that we make, human beings can make between these individual alams is through the use of aql. So the whole process of reflection on the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has an object of reflection and a faculty with which we reflect, and they both are connected together through these mechanisms. Is it clear? Little bit. And these are things which cannot really happen, which cannot be known just in one session or two sessions. These are things which take time. We cannot just go and attend a weekend seminar on some science thing about teaching science or learning science and say now we have mastered what it's supposed to be. The reflection on creation, the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a huge theme. This is a lifelong journey for all of us, inshallah. Next questions, we have some time.
So this phrase, my understanding is the samawat is a plural. So in the same context, is al-ard is a plural or is it a singular?
Inshallah. So I will just repeat the question for the online audience. The question is in the Badi'u Samawati wal Earth, we have Samawat in plural, and is the earth in singular or plural? This is a very important question in the sense of the usage of in the Quran of the Samawat, which occurs both in singular and in plural, and the earth, which occurs mostly in the singular. Although there is this one ayah in which it occurs in mislihunna, ardeen mislihunna, in which it occurs as if there are 7 earths, Sabah Samawat and ardeen. There is one ayah. So when the scholars reflected on that usage, 2 explanations are given. Number 1 is that the Quran is primarily addressed to human beings. Human beings live on earth, and the earth on which they live is only one, the one we know. So most of the time, the usage is just singular. However, there is zawjain. There is the pairing of every creation. He created everything in pairs. And the pairs are also in gender and number as well. So, Sabah Samawat and Sawardeen. 7 Samawat and 7 earths. And then obviously the question arose, where are the other 6? And what does it mean? Are these the 7 layers of the same planet Earth that we know? Or are they 7 distinct Earths, just like 7 Samawat? And the answer is we have no access to those, just as we have no access to the understanding of the Tibaka, the 7 Samawat. We know they exist because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us He created 7 layered Samawat, and there are 7 earths. And then there are other riwayas, especially going back to Muqatil bin Sulaiman. He died in 150, and his tafsir has tremendous amount of Israeliyats and many narrations. And Imam Bukhari, rahimullah, he doesn't really pass judgments on previous people, but in this case, he has a very strong warning. He said he was nothing about Muqatil bin Sulaiman, but and his tafsir exists, but he has tremendous amount of Israeliyat, and one I don't want to say what he said about these 7 earths and stuff like that, but he appears everywhere in terms of Israeliyats.
So then, to be clear, the sum of you, all the Samawat are of the green. Or, because like immediately I started thinking, okay, so then where's the Barzakh? Because that's before the day of judgment. When the people are in the grave, and they're in the Barzakh, is that part of the samawat, or is it another realm completely different? How are those related?
The question is about several questions in one question. One is, are all the samawat, are the 7 samawat part of the dunya? The second, where is barzakh? Third, when somebody dies in the grave, is that a samawat?
Is that, they are in the barzakh, but is the barzakh in the samawat?
Is the barzakh in the samawat? The first is no, because the sama dunya is mentioned in the Quran. We have sama dunya, the sama of this dunya. So the 7 samawat are not in this dunya. Dunya is a theme in itself, but dunya is the lower. What is lower? Dunya is something low in terms of. So there is a spatial hierarchy. With the advent of modern astronomy, we have come to sort of understand that when we look up, we say Allah is up. But our directionality is only from the reference point of being on Earth. So if we ever are taken in a space shuttle to the moon or further away, and we know from the pictures and images, this Earth itself is revolving. It's just part of the big. So there is the up and down sort of disappear in that, but there is a spatial hierarchy and there is a spiritual hierarchy. And inshallah, maybe more than one of the sessions on this cosmology, there is a book by Imam al-Suyuti that I want to go into details of the spiritual cosmology. And what are the rules? What are the, like, we have this understanding of distance, light years, for example. We use the scales. Light years is a unit of length, of distance. Because these distances are so huge, we came up with this new scale of measuring them. Likewise, there are units of spiritual hierarchy, and one of the units that Imam al-Suyuti mentions is the closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the spiritual spatial hierarchy. Another unit is the temporal hierarchy, meaning what was created first, that must be in higher order. What was created before other creation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to honor something by creating that thing before other things. First things first. So those scales exist. But to go back to your question, no, the 7 samawat are not in this dunya. And we also know this from the hadith of Miraj. These are distinct, layered samawat. And you remember in the narrations about Miraj, every sama had a door, a lock. Like there was a knock, and the question was asked, who is this? Were you asked? Were you invited? Who is with you? Those. And the barzakh is also something very important in itself, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created barzakh. وَبَيْنَهُمَا بَرْزَخٌ لَا يَبْغِيَانِ. Surah Al-Rahman. And they cannot cross. Barzakh are also of 2 kinds. One is the physical barzakh, as mentioned in Bahrain in Surah Al-Rahman. So there are these 2 seas, And there are the spiritual, non-physical barzakhs. When we die and we are in the grave, we are in a temporal barzakh. We are still in this dunya, our bones are crumbling and disintegrating, etc. But we are in a temporal, in a time barzakh. So there is a dimension of barzakh in time, meaning, and then there is the barzakh that is mentioned in Surah Al-Araf, between the Jannah and the Jahannam. These people are in the in-between state. So barzakh is something in between. It's a temporary state, and barzakh itself is temporary in one aspect, but people in the barzakh, or entities in the barzakh, or anything in the barzakh is also on the move. They have a destination, they haven't gone there yet, but they will go. So our state in the barzakh, when we are in the grave, is a time related, it's a temporal barzakh. Have I answered everything? Or is there something?
Well, going back to the question, is the barzakh part of the seven samawat or the seven earths? Is it somewhere in there? Does it say in the Qur'an? I know.
Yeah, so the question again is whether barzakh is part of the seven samawat or the seven earths, or does the Quran say anything about it? So the answer is yes. We have this mention of a physical barzakh in the oceans, and people have gone and tried to find it and say this is barzakh. And the danger there is when they say this is barzakh, meaning they have limited the term barzakh to this physical realm. No, the barzakh is not just the two oceans which cannot meet, and then they go into the chemistry of the salt water, of two kinds of water, and then they say, Subhanallah, this is in the Qur'an, this chemistry is in the Qur'an, and this is all the rest of it. No. So the answer to your question is that the barzakh that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the book is one of the barzakh is the term for barzakh is the physical barzakh that is mentioned in Surah Al-Rahman, but the other one is Al-Araf, people of Al-Araf, the heights in Surah Al-Araf. That state of people who are not in any of the two places yet, they are in between, people of the heights. So this barzakh, the grave, is not, is part of the dunya, is part of this dunya, planet Earth, which in itself is in the sama of dunya, revolving. So sama of dunya has the sun, the moon, the planets, Marikh, everything, all the galaxies and everything. Earth is one of those. Upon the earth, the grave is one of their place in this one single earth. And the people in the grave who are still physically present there, who have died yesterday or a year before, their bodies have not crumbled yet. They are there. But once the bodies are crumbled, like people who died several centuries ago, for example, and there is nothing left except for the tailbone that is mentioned in the hadith, from which everything is going to be recreated. So for them, the barzakh is temporal. Is the time.
I think I'm wrapping.
Yeah.
We use the term akal. You said the akal will be image and acquired.
There too, I didn't say, I don't have that knowledge, but that's what Raghib says. Yeah.
So innate is something like which will roughly be considered like with born, and the acquired is what you absorb, and then we corrupt our innate akal with the wrong information. What's the process of reversing it?
So the question is that Imam Raghib said that there are two kinds of akal. One is we translated innate and the other acquired, and his terms are matbu and masmu. And matmu, taba, is what is stamped, literally. When we stamp something, matbu, when we print something, matbu. And innate is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala imprinted in the constitution of our existence, in our beings. He imprinted aql, so that we cannot really corrupt that aql. So your question is that the acquired aql can corrupt it, because then there would be no path back to the innate. What we do is that we, just like this paint, I gave the example of this, so we paint over it. So the path to restoration is to remove the ran, as the Quran tells us, Balrana ala qulubihim. So there is this rust that has come on their hearts. And because aql is also connected with the qalb in a very mysterious way, which Imam Ghazali spent a lot of time explaining the difference between them and their interaction with each other. So the answer to your question is that restoration, because the original cannot be destroyed. It can only be painted. In teaching of science, how do we gain a core understanding in teaching of science, how do we gain a core understanding to approach the topic? That is establishing of first principles in order to see things as they really are. And the other question is barzakh not a temporary place where our soul goes to be while body is in the grave till we are resurrected? Let me just answer the second question first, because we are on that topic. So is barzakh not a temporary place where our soul goes to be while body is in the grave till we are resurrected? So when we think about the question itself, it becomes a little bit tricky to answer because the terminology. So soul goes to be while body is in grave till we are resurrected. I think the soul here is perhaps ruh, the spirit, and the body is in the grave until we are resurrected. Yes, in that sense, is barzakh not a temporary place where our soul goes? So alimul arwah, see the word alam again shows up, alam al arwah. So we didn't mention that. Jazakallah for asking this question, because that brings another dimension to the alam. Because ruh is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we have not been given knowledge about it. When we die, what happens to the soul or ruh? Is it in the barzakh? In a way, it is in the barzakh, because this is the waiting place. If we conceive barzakh as a waiting place, it's like the lobby at the airport before the next flight. We are in between the two. Then yes, the arwah are there in that temporary place until they are put back into the bodies which will be resurrected. Yes, in that sense, it will be the temporary place until the day of resurrection. The last question with which we'll end, inshallah, is the teaching of science. How do we gain a core understanding to approach the topic? That is establishing the first principles in order to see things as they really are. This is a huge topic in itself, because science is a means It's a one branch of knowledge out of many branches of knowledge that exist. We are living in the age of science, so to speak. Therefore, it has become the dominant branch. Like we don't normally, we don't ask the question, what is the correct Quranic view of teaching history? History is a subject, science is a subject, but history doesn't come up to the same level for some reason as science does. That itself is a problem. Why do we have to have so much focus on one part and not on other? Because if we don't have correct understanding of history, we cannot have correct understanding of science. Because science is a human activity that takes place within a civilization. Civilizations are part of history. Now we take science to be universal activity, universal human activity, which practically it is. But if we don't remember and if we say, yes, this is the only way to investigate the creation is through the science that we have, there are no other means of investigating the creation, the order of creation, then we are really finished. Because this contemporary science is based on first principles which are in stark contradiction to the principles that we derive from the Quran. So the foundations of the science need to be understood in order to, and this cannot happen through a course or two. It's a field in itself that requires a tremendous amount of reflection, tremendous amount of work. Inshallah, we end here. We seek forgiveness and this beautiful khutbah we had in this masjid on Friday about never reaching the state of false security. And this is part of this process of reflection, that we always remain conscious of Allah's makr. This forgetfulness that we have reached somewhere is very dangerous. So we seek two things. Number one, Allah show us the nature of things as they really are. And the second is part of it, show us the haqq as haqq and grant us the ability to follow it, and show us the batil as batil and grant us the ability to avoid it. So, ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. يا الله أنت حليم كريم عظيم تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم. اللهم ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. يا الله أنت حليم كريم عظيم تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم. رب اغفر وارحم أنت خير الراحمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Amin ya Rabbil Alameen. Inshallah, I will put the recording again and share the link with you all. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.